obviously I am not at the museum. I'm at my Airbnb in Gwangju, but funny enough, on my way in, I made a real quick pit stop at the Gwangju National Mall to try to take one thing off of tomorrow's kind of itinerary. And I figured I'd only need about an hour and a half there. Google suggested that you spend an hour and a half there, and I think that if it was fully open, non-COVID type things, an hour and a half would be fair. But the fact of the matter is that they are running COVID times, and when I entered, it's free by the way. When I entered, a lady came out and she's like, "Are you going into the mall or into the museum?" I was like, "Yes," and so she just "Please use this alcohol right here, and I need to scan your temperature." And so, fair enough, she scanned my temperature. I sanitized my hands, walked straight up into the mall, or I keep calling it a mall, the museum, and went straight in. The guys at the table flagged me down, so I entered the museum, and there was three gentlemen sitting at a desk there, and they waved me over. They asked what language I wanted the tour guide thing that they gave me to be in. I said English. The guy was assuming Chinese, and I understand why. But I was like, English. He handed it to me, and he goes, "Go up those stairs right behind you." And that's where the tour begins. I kind of just followed his instructions, went upstairs. There was another gentleman, or a couple guys sitting up there. They flagged me down again, told me to go over into the next room where it kind of did this really great intro video. It was about 3 minutes long. It was all about Gwangju and the surrounding areas, I should say. The name actually slips me now, but they didn't just use Gwangju as the name. It's the actual province, I think, is what they're talking about. They actually had all these quotes come from all these great people about how this is such an important area to Korean heritage. Things like how this was really the center of trade, even though Busan did a lot of the shipping and everything. It all actually started kind of in this area. And looking at the way they set everything up, it really tells a really good story on how this area really is the beginning of this whole generalized southern part of South Korea. And it really started with pottery, or what is it? I always forget the pottery terms, like ceramics and whatnot. The earthenware, I guess you could call it. But right after the video, you walk in and it goes into the Paleolithic age. It goes pretty much like the age of cavemen, and it showed what they thought early Koreans would look like. They went into the different Bronze Age, Rock Age, and immediately that was just such a small part of the museum. It immediately then goes into the Iron Age and kind of their evolution, I guess you could say. They had a thing about how the first wheel was created here in Korea, and how it had 22 spokes. It was such an important number for them, and how they created it, and how it showed that it was made for a carriage and not a cart, which is kind of an interesting idea. So that it wasn't made to be for transporting items, it was made to be transporting people, is what they're really getting at. And then moving on from there, it kind of went into their cultural area, where it really did a deep dive of the Gwangju historic culture, I guess you could say, and it really had to just do with ceramics and that earthenware that I was talking about. They had all sorts of different information about the different areas that certain clays came from, what type of earth actually makes the best ceramics. They also went into the different uses of the ceramics, aside from drinking or eating from, or even storing food in. The first coffins were made out of two really big kind of ceramic jars that they would interlock together, kind of like one of those plastic Easter eggs. I guess you could kind of look at it like that, and how that was a huge part of the history here, and how they've they've been able to find all sorts of crazy ceramics. When the Japanese invaded the Imjin Wars, and they would come here and see such like fine craftsmanship, they would actually capture the masters, the ceramic masters, and they would bring them back to Japan and kind of have them go around teaching people. And so this really was only in the Kyushu area, because I learned a little bit of a difference of history of ceramics in Japan. But this one, the big thing that came out of it was the Hizen ceramics, which is based in the Nagasaki Saga area. And they got their ideas and everything that they do in that area actually came from Korea, apparently. It was taught by Korean masters to Japanese disciples. And so that was a really interesting move right there. And then it ended up that Japan became better at creating the plates and the jars and the vases and everything, and then would ship to Busan from Japan, and they would sell it off that way. Another really interesting thing is, it's ironic, there's actually a cup here that's of that color. This blue color is a particular blue color that's to this area only, really. During that time, they actually could not get that blue anywhere else, and they found it. And it wasn't until one of the kings of the area, he didn't want to have such a plain item. He wanted something that was a little bit more unique and something cleaner, is what they put it. And that's when they came up with the white porcelain plates, chinaware, if you would call it that. And what's interesting is that during that time, it didn't last all that long. So to have like clean white plates didn't last all that long, because of the fact of there was an invasion on both sides, from Japan and from China, and Korea needed to kind of save money. And so in order to do that, the materials that they used to make the white, they would mix that blue that I was just showing you into it, and that blue white color is actually considered cheaper, which is funny because I'm really used to seeing like bowls that are kind of blue and white and have either, I think it's like longevity or fortune in Chinese written on the side of the bowl. And it's really funny because that actually is a quote-unquote cheaper type of bowl, because it was just easier to create and cost less. And so that was kind of an interesting tidbit. And then kind of the last section was of purely just ceramics. That was all they had in the room, and that's kind of where I learned about that blue color, this blue color that I was just talking about, and how it's like unique to the area. The blue that you see in the blue and white actually is a little darker. I said it's the same. I was wrong. Now that I remember, it's a little bit darker in its blue, and the reasoning is that it's far easier to find that material in order to use it. And so just it was a real interesting walkthrough. It took me only an hour, and that included the 3-minute video at the very beginning, another 3-minute video in the middle that kind of explained the usage of tools, from nets to catch fish, specialized farming tools in order to help like harvest and plant, and hunting tools so that they could catch either deer or boar in the area. And there was plenty of English, which was kind of nice, so I could just read a lot of things and then kind of move on. Again, it was a real quick trip, easy. Everything was free. Just I would say the driving situation there was a little crazy, because I had to do this it was practically a U-turn to get into the place. It was a street that had like 5 streets, like it forked out into 4 from 1. So you had to like choose which way to go, and one turn was literally like a V. So I went up and then back down, so it was a U-turn. And the parking was free, and getting in was free, and just seeing all that, that history from this area was pretty cool. The biggest thing that I was like bummed out about is that the May rebellion that they had here, it's either May or March, I'm not 100% sure, but there was a movie made about it called A Taxi Driver, and it stars the same gentleman who was in Parasite, the father from Parasite, and he's a taxi driver, and he comes to Gwangju to drive a German reporter around during an uprising that was happening here. And actually, I shouldn't say it was an uprising. It was a protest that went south real fast, and a lot of students were killed. They don't actually have the official numbers, but I will be visiting that site tomorrow to check out where the shooting actually happened. And it was soldiers that were doing it. So it kind of reminds me of the Little Rock 7 type deal, maybe? Was it that? I'm getting my history mixed up, but it was when the National Guard went and shot students at one of the universities in America during the 60s or 70s. It was a very similar situation here in Gwangju, and I was hoping that they'd go a little bit more into that knowledge so that I could have a better understanding of where I'm going to tomorrow, but it didn't really talk about that. It all ended with pretty much I guess you could say the Three Kingdoms era, or the Joseon era, I think it was. Like, I don't know what the eras are, but it pretty much is when they were still wearing those funny hats, if you know what I mean. And so it was all ancient type stuff, at least ancient to us. And it's a real good look at what it was like here, but I really wish that it would just gone a little bit more into modernity. That would have been cool to see that little extra. But I mean, it's free, so, you know, beggars and choosers and such. So I will see you in the next video.